Everyone has their own favourite foods to choose from, but how many of our beloved foods do we know the history of? Who has sat down with their burger at a fast food chain and asked themselves, where did the idea of burgers come from? Well, probably nobody, as their mouth would be full of burger before the thought would even occur to them. Some of the foods we eat day in, day out, however, can have surprisingly long histories behind them. In this video, we'll be exploring the origin stories behind 10 commonplace foods from around the world. Try not to get too hungry. Number 10. Burgers. A lot of people reckon that the burger was an American invention, but they were by no means the first country to think it up. The humble burger, like many other foods, actually has quite a long history attached to it. Perhaps it did not have the cheese, onions, and buns to go with it, but it was definitely there. The full name, hamburger, originates from 1880 when German immigrants created the meal within Hamburg, Germany. In order to make a beefsteak, they would grind up the meat and create a steak from what remained, calling it a Hamburg steak. The steak would eventually have its name shortened to hamburger. What must be noted, however, was that this was the origin of the steak itself. Nobody knows quite where the idea of sticking a hamburger between two buns came from. As for the steak itself, well, we have our German friends to thank for that. Big Macs would not be the same without you. There is a little bit of history that states that the Romans created the Isia aumentata, not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, which some people regard as the first burger. However, this does appear to be a recipe for a sausage rather than an actual burger. More on sausages a bit later in this video. Number 9. French fries. Of all the foods to have an origin story, this one seems to be the most clear-cut as to where it came from. Unfortunately, there's an ongoing dispute between France and Belgium as to who really made it. The Belgium side of the story is that in the 17th century, residents of the Meuse Valley in Belgium were not shy of frying things. They had a tendency to fry any fish that they caught, which made up the majority of what they ate. When winter came and the rivers froze over, the Belgians turned to the ever-reliable spud, preparing them in battered slices, the same way that they prepared fish. The French side states that in the late 17th century, potatoes were regarded unfit for human consumption and only pigs would eat them. When a famine struck in 1785, this mindset changed and the French gave the potato another chance. It caught on so well that by 1795 they were grown everywhere, with even some royal gardens being converted to help grow the friendly spud. During this boom, someone had the smart idea of frying the slices and selling them as frites. Thus, the French fry was born. Whatever side you take, just remember that asking for Belgian fries at a drive-thru will certainly get you funny looks. Number 8. Sausages. The exact origin of the sausage is unclear, with reports ranging around 50,000 BC. There is an argument, however, that the sausages, frankfurters, and hot dogs that people eat on a daily basis originated from a desire to preserve meat. Ever wonder why sausages are wrapped in some form of casing? Well, the reason is that before refrigeration, butchers would want to preserve the meat during transit. They took the meat, organs, and blood of a slaughtered animal, sprinkled it with salt to preserve it, then wrapped it in the animal's intestine or stomach to stop it going off before it could be eaten. This is why some sausages contain a large amount of blood in their recipes. The origin of this practice was to help use up any blood that was left over after slaughtering an animal. We have no real use for salting today, given that fridges are perfectly good at preserving meat. The tradition of putting the meat in a casing, however, that's still going strong. Number 7. Pizza. Anytime anyone mentions the dish, the image of black-haired, rotund Italian chefs kissing their fingers comes to mind. The traditional image of the dish, consisting of bread, tomatoes, and cheese, did, in fact, originate in Naples. The food was easy to make with little cost and was regarded as something that the poor could eat to keep themselves going. It contained cheese, tomatoes, and basil, very similar to the kinds that we consume today. The idea of placing food on top of flatbread, however, that dates to well before the Italian invention. A lot of cultures, including the Romans and the Egyptians, came up with the concept of meal on top of flatbread, but the Persians were the first recorded case. When King Darius the Great ruled the Persian Empire, it is thought that his soldiers baked flatbreads on their shields and added cheese and dates for flavoring. Apparently, ordering Domino's while in enemy territory wasn't ideal. Number 6. Tomato ketchup. Everyone would probably think that tomato ketchup would originate from the USA, and they'd actually be right. The first recipe popped up in 1801 in the Sugar House Book, an American publication. What's interesting about the Americans' favorite condiment, however, is that ketchup was based on an older recipe. Its original name is Ketchup, and it started in the 17th century in China. While it has a name similar to the bottle of the red stuff people shamelessly apply to everything, the actual sauce itself was made up of fish brine and spices. The Dutch and English would end up taking a few bottles back home with them, well loved due to its ability to keep for a large amount of time, which was a key trait that sailors and travelers appreciated when stocking their larders. The sauce saw a lot of remixes on the original recipe, including a moment in time where mushrooms were a primary ingredient. That's of course before the now famous tomato variation was devised. Number 5. Chocolate. When you take a bite out of a well-made chocolate bar, it feels like you're eating the food of the gods. And, well, you'd actually be exactly right. The story begins as far back as 1500 BC when the Olmec managed to find and utilize cocoa beans. Of course, they were not called cocoa beans back then, but rather cacao, where we actually get the name. They managed to turn it into a drink, but historians are hard-pressed to find any evidence that the Olmec did anything much else with it. The Mayans, however, they loved the stuff. They identified it as a food of Kon, the god of rain and wind. They drank it, used the mixture as a substitute for blood in rituals, and even used the beans as currency. That's right, once upon a time, you could buy things with chocolate. As for the solid bars we all know and love today, well, that didn't pop up until around 1850 AD. Number 4. Worcestershire Sauce. While relatively unknown to most of the world, this foodstuff gets a spot on this list because it was made entirely by accident. The recipe made its way over to Worcester in England. You can probably see where this is going, where two chemists, John Wheely Lee and William Perrins, got their hands on it. They marketed this new exotic sauce, claiming all sorts of healing properties to cure common problems. When they actually made the stuff, however, it tasted awful. The pair stuffed the rest in a barrel and left it in the cellar, presumably to use again someday. That day, it didn't come until 2 years later. The pair, rediscovering their old invention, decided to give it a second shot. And what should probably have killed them, the sauce did have fish in it after all, actually tasted really good. The pair decided to sell the sauce under the name Lee and Perrins, a brand name that is strong to this day. Who knows how many other food inventions we've missed due to people not willing to eat vastly out-of-date food. Number 3. Milkshake. Milkshakes are a lovely treat for the young, but you definitely would not want to give the original recipe to a child. The first time the world saw the word milkshake was in 1885 in a British newspaper. The article didn't go on to talk about if people preferred strawberry or banana flavor. In fact, what the article did say was that a milkshake was a sturdy, healthful eggnog type of drink with eggs, whiskey, etc., served as a tonic as well as a treat. Yep, that's right, the original milkshake definitely contained alcohol. The actual milkshake we know and love today came a little later in the 1900s. In 1922, a man called Ivan Pop Coulson wanted to make a remix on the recipe. Ever an experimenter, he added the one ingredient that made a huge impact on the recipe of milkshake forever, and that of course is ice cream. Since then, the version with whiskey in it has fallen out of public knowledge. Unfortunately, alcoholic milkshakes are not an item on the hidden menu in fast food places. Number 2. Graham crackers. Do you feel less lust after eating a graham cracker? Well, you should do, or at least the inventor hoped that you do. In the 1830s, Reverend Sylvester Graham decided that America had become too lust-filled. In order to curb the problem and help people across the nation get back onto a good God-fearing path, he created the Graham diet. The diet consisted of wheat, fruit, and vegetables, but absolutely no meat. Eating meat and fatty foods was, Graham claimed, a way to invoke sexual thoughts in the mind. Sylvester Graham invented the graham cracker as part of his newfound diet. He wasn't alone in this mindset. Someone else who shared this was John Harvey Kellogg. And if that name seems familiar to you, you're probably thinking of Kellogg's cornflakes. That beloved breakfast cereal was Kellogg's way to save the souls of the American people, but it ended up being just a rather delicious breakfast cereal rather than a cure for a wandering eye. Next time you need to calm down, try stuffing graham crackers in your mouth. If the wheat doesn't do the trick, the dry mouth certainly will. Number 1. Marshmallows. In order to understand where the marshmallow came from, you must first understand that the name marshmallow is a combination of marsh and mallow. It refers to the mallow plants that grow around marshes, hence the name. This specific plant was harvested in Egyptian times. They did not merely eat it for its sweet flavor, however. Back then, Egyptian doctors were convinced that marshmallow was an effective way of curing a sore throat in children, which sounds like a medication a child would never reject. In fact, it's thought that this miracle medicine was eaten by richer kids as a treat rather than a cure. As for the marshmallow as we know it today, the root goes back to 1800s France, where it was pushed as a treat for kids and adults alike. Then, in 1948, Alex Dumac created a way to make the little delights in a way that was completely automated, allowing the sweet treat to be produced efficiently. While the marshmallow today is treated as a candy rather than a medicine, maybe it wouldn't hurt to buy a big bag and experiment for yourself the next time you catch a cold. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, as always, just give us a thumbs up below and subscribe. Brand new videos just like this every day of the week, and if you want something else to watch, check out another video, link to on the screen now. And as always, thank you for watching.